Hello, welcome to the Careers in Finance webinar for students on the Masters in Law and Finance programme. I'm Claire, the Events, Careers and Alumni Officer for the MLF programme. I work closely with the careers advisors at both the Said Business School and the university's Career Service to provide support as you transition to the next stage in your careers. I'd like to introduce John Madgwick, one of the excellent team of careers advisors at the Career Service at the Said Business School. John spent 15 years in front office banking before moving into financial services recruitment, both agency and in-house, where he recruited for top-tier investment banks and asset managers. In the 2 years prior to joining Oxford Said, he spent time as the interim head of recruitment at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and he also undertook a professional qualification in career management. John will give you an overview of the finance industry and explain where the MLFs typically fit. He will expand on recruitment timelines and the application process, as well as giving you advice on what to do to prepare, including tips on how to fine-tune your CV. At the end, we will make time for you to ask questions. John, over to you.
Thank you, Claire, and as you just heard, I'm part of the Said Business School's career development team, but you guys are very lucky in the sense that you have access both to the career development team here at Said, but also the excellent career team at the Oxford Careers Service over in Banbury Road. So you'll have double access to resources, double access to events, and double access to one-to-one careers advice. And where I can, I will make reference throughout the PowerPoint presentation to allow you a taste of what you can get from both worlds. So just to map out what I will talk about, this is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the finance world. So a quick overview of the finance industry, where MLFs fit within that world. We'll touch on some of the recruitment timelines because those will be important to the early starters. And we'll look a little bit on some of the things you want to start thinking about now ahead of your arrival in Oxford. And as I mentioned earlier, look at some of the resources available to you, and we'll end up with a very brief, rather basic, but look at the application process and some quick CV tips. Obviously, there is, finance is much more about banking. Many of our students here and in the wider university, and indeed I think from the MLF programme as well, tend to target the banking world, and in particular the investment banking world. So we will talk about that to a certain extent. But I want you to be very aware, and maybe particularly in this current environment that we're facing at the moment, of the other opportunities within financial services that you might be attracted to and employed in. So not just the commercial, retail, and investment banking world, but also what we call the buy side in terms of long only institutional investors, the asset management world. That will also encompasses private equity, venture capital and hedge funds to a certain extent. Obviously there are the regulators and the regulatory departments within other financial institutions. Development banks, places like the EBRD for example, the World Bank, Asian Development Banks, etc., the IFC. Some students will want to target sovereign wealth funds, rating agencies. And then, of course, we've got the public sector organisations, for example, in this country, the FCA, the FSA, the stock exchanges, and obviously the finance divisions too of corporates. Where do Masters of Law and Finance students typically fit? Well, a number will want to target the M&A departments of the investment banks. Also the restructuring and distressed debt arenas of those institutions, as well as the distressed debt and restructuring functions within, for example, private equity. The leveraged finance arena of banks, private equity generally, and of course, as mentioned before, the sort of compliance and regulatory departments of all these institutions, whether they be in-house at banks or indeed on the standalone regulators themselves. And in terms of management consultancy, there are always, I think, a few MLF students interested in going to management consultancy. They tend to focus on the strategy consultancy firms, so firms like McKinsey and BCG. So what are employers looking for typically from an MLF student that quite often doesn't have direct and previous experience in finance or banking? Well, they're looking at your transferable skills, and maybe we can touch on this a little bit later, in the sense that some of these things you maybe want to think about drawing out in your cover letters and your CVs. And they're looking typically at the skills that a typical MLF would come with. So that's, attention to detail, persuasiveness, being able to construct a clear argument, your negotiation skills, your analytical skills, the problem-solving skills. Problem-solving is particularly looked at in the management consultancy world. And they're looking for people who can grow into senior managers and be able to contact with outside clients. So any evidence of empathy and tact will be scrutinised quite closely. So there's a lot of things there that you can work on and leverage and think about where you want to best place them. We'll have a look now at some of the timelines. The bigger firms, and this applies to management consultancy as well broadly, but the bigger bulge bracket firms tend to have fairly aggressive timelines. So for those students that feel they are ready to embark on applications, then you need to be on it pretty early, because many of these programs, both at analyst level and associate level, will open in the summer. Many of them will open before even your arrival in Oxford, and they will close sometime between October and December. Excuse me. And in many cases, for many banks, they recruit on a rolling basis, meaning that they take good people when they see them. So in that sense, an early start is advisable, because if you leave it too close to the deadline, you may well find that many of the spots have already been taken. Some of the smaller boutique type investment banks and some of the PE firms, the venture capital firms and the hedge funds, they're hiring really more along immediate business needs methodology, and so their hiring tends to be more spread out, more opportunistic. Will really kick in the new year, into from January 2017 onwards, and could continue throughout the calendar year thereafter. And similarly, for those of you with more experience than would normally fit into an analyst or an associate program, you'll be needing to look at the lateral hires, the sort of hires that are open to all, that are put on job boards, that are put on company websites, and those will be again slightly ad hoc, but ongoing throughout the calendar year. Let's have a little look now at some of the preparation that you may want to start doing ahead of your arrival. And I can't stress enough how much you should try and be self-aware in terms of what you want to do and where you want to go. It's probably the most difficult bit to get right for many people, but it is the most important. So do start thinking a little bit about the lifestyle you want to lead in terms of your work-life balance. Think about the working environment. Do you want to work in a boutique firm? Do you want to work in a large firm? Do you want to work in a regional firm or an international firm? Think about these things. Think about the products you want to work with, particularly those people going into banking. Are you really interested in equities? Are you really interested in bonds? Are you really interested in commodities? Think about the underlying assets and products that you'll be working with, and whether they really properly interest you, and where that interest will be sustained over a long period. Are you a client-facing person? Are you a natural sort of business developer? We all have clients to a certain extent, whether they be internal or external. But think about whether you want to be outward-facing or inward-facing in that sense. And obviously your cultural and geographical preferences. And again, there's some pragmatism that needs to be thought about here in terms of where you are most likely to be able to secure a role. Think about the daily routine. How much travel is involved in the job or not? Is that something that you crave, or is that something that scares you stiff? Think also about the long-term career prospects for the roles you're going into. For those of you that are looking particularly into banking, there's a very good a tool actually on the Goldman Sachs careers website, which helps you it's a quiz that takes you through the various things that you may want to think about. So it's a good place to start for those of you who are thinking about the banking industry. So some things to consider. First of all, focus. It's fine, and I don't want to make too much of a song and dance about focus, because it is fine if you feel you are not ready to focus. But if you feel you are, then don't let it slip, because at interview, even on paper, in application forms, for example, and cover letters, it's pretty easy, believe you me, to detect those people that lack focus and are therefore regarded as not being particularly serious about what they want to do. And applications themselves will require some sort of department selection, so pre-focus ahead of that is pretty important. And suitability, it comes back to that self-awareness. Many students, and I have seen many students, and I know that many students are a little bit sort of bedazzled by shiny lights of some jobs without really thinking whether it is properly suitable for them. And all I would say is that from my experience, if you're not suited for the role, even if you manage to get through the interview process and get offered a job, you'll find out sooner rather than later that you're probably underperforming in that job. And finally, research. There is a lot you can do before you arrive in Oxford, and I would encourage you to do it. The MLF programme is a fully packed agenda, as are the other programmes here, and I know you will struggle for time in order to research what you want to research once you're here. So any pre-prep you can do about that will hold you in good stead. So what next in terms of preparation? We'll take a quick look at getting an early start. We've already done that to a certain extent. We'll look at the toolkit available to you both at Said and indeed at the Oxford Careers Service, some of the resources available to you. And as I said earlier, at the top of the webinar, we'll have a quick look at application process and CV tips right at the end before the Q&A. So your approach now, if you haven't already done so, do begin now. Work out what your USPs, your unique selling points are, whether that be language ability, whether that be a particular sector background that you can leverage. If you're serious about finance, then you need to become, as one of my previous bosses would say, a finance ninja. There is no excuse for either being behind the curve technically or informationally, if I can use that expression. Again, it's very obvious at interview those students who have picked up The Economist or the FT just 10 days or 2 weeks before they get to interview, thinking that preparation will be enough. It isn't. you need to immerse yourself in as much of the financial press and media that you can possibly get your hands on. Be aware and address any areas of development that you think you may have. I'm sure there are people here and indeed at OCS that are able to help you with that. And network. It's one of the words that gets repeated most often in the business school. It's a great place to develop your networks, Oxford, both from the college point of view and your classmates' point of view, and other courses. It's very, very important in terms of being able to secure the role that you eventually want. So network like crazy, read like crazy, complete focus and persistence from now right through the whole MLF program, and as again with the caveat that if you don't feel you are ready and you want to have that learning under your belt before you maybe apply next year, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to get on with it now, then it needs to have a lot of your attention and focus. And build your knowledge base. Go to presentations, go to conferences, talk to everyone, talk to your classmates, learn from them. The group learning exercise is one of the most powerful things you can do. So do talk to people on the MBA course here, on the MFE course here, your fellow students and colleagues on the MLF course, and other people throughout the various networks that exist in Oxford to build that information bank. And clearly don't forget the soft side of everything as well. There is a lot you can do and prep in terms of technical ability, but there are also some soft skills that may be needed rounding out and developed too, because ultimately the person across the desk that will offer you the role will be looking at you and thinking, do I want to spend N number of hours per week, day after day, with this person, or sit on a plane for 10 or 11 hours travelling to Asia with this person. So think about that, the whole rounded student, if you like. During the MLF, as I said, you will have access to a whole host of resources, both here from the business school, but also through your college, from the Banbury Road Careers Service, and other networks that you develop. I'll touch on some of the events, but certainly the Oxford Careers Service puts on pretty early in the sort of first couple of weeks of term some important events that you might want to just diarise now or make note of now. So the banking, for example, the banking and investment, everything you need to know, I think starts in the week commencing the 10th of October. The finance fair, which is, I think, lasts a whole afternoon, sort of 2:30 through to 6 o'clock, where many financial services firms will be in attendance, is happening on the 19th of October this year. And I know that they will be announcing soon some insights into business programme that the OCS run as well. So there's just a few maybe to make a note of now. For those of you who are targeting specific areas of finance, so for example, some aspects of private equity, M&A, corporate finance, leverage finance, project infrastructure finance, you may well want to think very carefully about trying to apply for and get on the Oxford Said Finance Lab programme. I'm assuming that those that do will already be aware of it and maybe have attended the Finance Lab specific webinars that we put on 2 or 3 weeks ago. If you haven't and you don't know about it, then please do ask later, maybe after the webinar, maybe not in the Q&A session because we don't get bogged down with the Finance Lab, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that offline, so to speak. I touched on it earlier, but also during your programme, do take advantage of getting involved in either the challenges that exist or competitions or events. They're a really great way of putting some of the classroom teaching into practice, and will be hugely beneficial for you, not just in the long term, but in the short term too, in terms of being able to talk about that maybe with some of your interviewers. And it will stand you out, because this will be a great way of demonstrating your motivation. I've got network up there again in red. I can't emphasize it enough. Do reach out to the people around you, reach out to MLF alumni, Said Business School alumni, Oxford University alumni, and see whether you can arrange conversations with them, non-threatening advice type conversations that will give you a great filter in terms of your own understanding of what you want to do, but also probably be very advantageous in terms of trying to secure that job. Remain focused. The word focus again. It's fine to change your mind, but if you concentrate on it whilst you're here. And remember that you may want to do an internship, so you need to plan accordingly for that in terms of your time and time management, either during or post the course. We'll have a look at the sort of toolkit available to you, and as I said earlier, you're in a great position, being able to have access to both the wider Oxford Careers Service and indeed the Business School Careers Service. For example, obviously there'll be pre-arrival and post-arrival help from both teams for you with CV writing and cover letter reviews. One of the things that you'll have access to this year via the Business School is a VMOC system, which is an online tool that allows you to upload your CV and gives you great feedback on that initially, in terms of content, in terms of language, in terms of layout, etc. And we encourage students more and more to use that initially before you come to certainly a Said Business School Careers Advisor, so we can take the conversation up a level from basic things like formatting and language. So you'll have access to VMOC. Use it and use it before you arrive, so that you get a head start. Also, you'll be able to get great information and tips from the Oxford Careers Service website. They've got some great information on and tips on CV and cover letter writing, and they will, as well as the business school, put on a lot of skills workshops during the course of Michaelmas term to get you up to speed on various elements, whether they be interview techniques, whether they be specific investment banking interview techniques, etc. And I know that the Oxford Careers Service too have an online psychometric testing, which might help you too, obviously with some of that self-awareness piece. Obviously we've touched on the sort of financial modelling and valuation skills that you can develop during, as a consequence of getting on to the Oxford Said Finance Lab. But David Beatty, my colleague in the careers team here, is also instigating this year a management consultancy development programme, again, which is designed to help students gain the skills and the case study skills needed for entry into the management consultancy world. One of the things that we do here at Said is also to work very closely with what we call industry advisors. These are a team of 27 people. There are 4 or 5 dedicated to my world, the finance world, who are deep experts in the areas they come from. They're not. They're usually self-employed. They're not full-time employees necessarily of the university, but they do have an affiliation with Oxford, and are very generous with their time in terms of helping students. So they're particularly good for mock interviews. So, as an example, one of the industry advisors I work closely with would be able to take you through mock interviews for first or second and third round interviews, technical interviews for M&A roles in the big banks, for example. There's another one steeped in private equity, actually runs his own private equity firm. So there's lots of help, I guess, is the message, and support that around here. And obviously you have access to me as almost as much as you want, and indeed my colleagues at the Oxford Careers Service. And they're also, I've mentioned it earlier, but part of the networking would be to get involved in some of the societies that are relevant to you. So what we call them the Oxford Business Networks. Here at the business school there's a finance network, there's a private equity network, there's an energy network. Do join up and get involved with those, because the people who chair and co-chair those are students, and they help with interviews, they help with mock interviews, they bring employers in, just as we do, but in a smaller way. So they're a great way to get your networking going. So when are you going to be ready for the application process? Well, many of you feel that you won't be ready. Others that do, I would suggest you'll have gone through some of the phases you can see there. So you will have already drawn up, having thought about your self-awareness, thought about the areas that are most applicable and interesting to you. You'll have brought together a target list of companies that will enable you to mine a little bit more deeply, both in terms of research, but in terms of networking too. You'll have gathered a lot of information, you'll have gone to presentations, you'll have met people at presentations, you'll be able to talk about those comfortably, and you'll be able to talk about your story comfortably and easily, and so you'll have your story in that sense clear. You'll also have looked at your CV, you'll have had it reviewed not just once, twice or three times, but a number of times, maybe with different people, just to make sure that you're perfectly happy with it, you're perfectly happy talking about it, and that same goes really for the cover letter piece as well. And you'll be relatively confident in as much as you can be in terms of your technical skills. So once you've done that, you'll be ready for some mock interviews. Have those mock interviews with me and colleagues and the industry advisors, and then I would suggest you really are ready to press the go button and go through the application process. And just to finish off, let's have a quick look at the application process for those students that feel they are ready and they want to make an early start. This is more focused on, I guess, on the banking and particularly investment banking world, but this is typically what you would expect in terms of the whole process. So it would be kicked off with online applications. Sometimes they take the form of their own questions, the firm's own questions that they ask you to answer. Other times it might be a simple CV and cover letter. There'll often be some online testing, both verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, numerical tests, for example. Many of these, certainly at the banks, one of the main providers is SHL. And you may well be able to find some material on that ahead of arrival to maybe practice some of those tests for those of you feeling nervous about them. Increasingly, companies will, before they actually meet you physically, will want to talk to you on the phone, or indeed increasingly also via video interviews. And I know again there's some good practice material on those, certainly on the OCS website. And we can take you through some of that too. Many institutions will also want to see you in action with others, so we'll ask you to go to assessment centres, which might be half a day long, could be a full day long. Very often they will involve group exercise work, presentation work, one-to-one interviews, maybe some more testing. Quite a full-on day, and again you'll get great practice on that. I know that OCS run practice days for assessment centres, and we put on workshops on the assessment centres too. And then obviously you also get one-to-one interviews, and that number of those can vary. Actually, before we came online today, Claire and I were talking about one MLF student had gone through, I think, 9 different interviews for one particular firm. So they do vary, and sometimes are incorporated too in the assessment centres. And then of course you'll get to the offer process, hopefully. Okay, and let's just to finish off before we go into the Q&A, some very basic CV tips. It is worth noting here that there's much of this you can get online, and indeed verbally from me if you wish before you arrive. There's lots of help both on the SBS Careers website and indeed the OCS Careers website. But some basic tips. Make it one page. It's very unusual that you would want to go over to 2 pages at your level of experience, unless of course you had lots of publications or something like that to include. So keep it simple. No photos, no date of birth, no different colours, nice black and white, simple format, simple font, no jargon. Think of the person on the other side of the desk with a pile of CVs this high. Make it easy for them so that it's clearly understandable and easy to read. And where you can quantify the impact you have, don't just list the responsibilities you may have had, the duties you may have had. You want to touch on those obviously so that we know what you've been doing. But I want to know what impact you've had in doing them, what value you've brought to the roles that you've had, and very importantly, align all that you say with the job description and the competencies that the firm you're applying for is requiring. There is no point talking about leadership, for example, if they're not at all interested in leadership and don't really mention it. Focus on what they're asking for and try and draw out from your previous experience where you could fit with that. And just a note on interests and hobbies, you need to be a little bit careful with those on your CV. Nothing wrong with having them on there at all, and in fact sometimes they can be the sort of icebreaker. But try and make them impactful as well. So I would avoid drinking red wine or reading books or whatever it might be. If it's horse riding, then make sure that you can give them some idea of what how competitive you've been in horse riding, whether you've won a gymkhana, or if it's mountain climbing, have you mentioned that you've done the 3 Peaks Challenge or climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Try and give it a little bit of impact is I guess the message. Okay, so there are some pretty basic tips on CVs. Lots more to come your way, both on a one-to-one basis and online. But I think, as I mentioned, it was a whistle-stop tour. It's been a whistle-stop tour, but now over to you for some Q&A.
Would you be able to tell us more about private equity entry positions and whether these firms may reasonably be interested in MLF students? Is it necessary to have done internships?
And in particular IB internships, I think. They're difficult. Many private equity firms, it is true, will ideally want you to have had some previous investment banking experience. But I know I say, and I know also our industry advisor Michael Patton, who runs his own private equity firm, would tell you if you are keen enough and serious enough, then nothing should hold you back. The three things that private equity firms look for really, are our investment banking, previous investment banking experience, particularly M&A investment banking experience, or some consultancy experience, so particularly strategy consulting experience, or some specific industry sector knowledge. Without any one of those, it'll be hard work. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't put in the hard work in order to be able to maybe develop some of those skills whilst you're here. But there aren't that many hires that take place in private equity anyway. The private equity world is largely populated by smaller niche players. Obviously, there are some big players. So the hiring process is ad hoc. So it's not a common route, I would argue, for MLF students.
So there's also a question about the one-page CV, and is it still necessary for an experienced candidate to produce a one-page CV?
Depends on the level of experience. I have now, I've been embarrassed to say, but going on for 35 years experience, and my CV is still on 2 pages. So I'll let that be a guide. If you've got a good CV, it'll be a powerful document anyway, and it doesn't need to be long. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should necessarily have a 2-page or 1-page CV for some of the legal opportunities you might be looking at. Those CVs do tend to be slightly different and slightly longer, and the legal world is more accustomed to those. But I am talking here specifically about finance roles. They need to be punchy, and unless you've got that level of experience, 10, 20 plus years, you should be able, if you think smartly about it, and with a lot of help from us, obviously, be able to get that out to one. I'm not married to one page, but if you're going for the programs where there'll be hundreds and hundreds of applicants, you want to make it as punchy as you can.
We did actually send out today the SBS's template CV, which you should have received by email earlier on today. So that's a really good guide to help you to prepare your one-page CV. So take a look at that and then have a go at creating that CV. Somebody else has just said that they've got a background in banking and insurance regulation, Financial Markets Authority, and what kind of position would you recommend in the private sector? And a question about how many referees should be included.
I wouldn't have, just to take the second question first, and I don't want to get bogged down here in too many specific questions about individuals, but let's try and keep the questions generic. I'm happy to take specific questions offline, but just on that second point, I'm just trying to read that question.
How many referees should we
How many referees? I wouldn't put referees down at all. I would just, maybe if you want to mention referees, I would have referees available when required or on request or something like that. I wouldn't volunteer referees straight away.
Does anybody have any more questions? We will actually be recording this, so you'll be able to watch it over again. And if you do have any more questions, you can always email them to me. I think you've all got my email address by now, and then I could pass them on to John, or we could send out sort of a selection of the questions with some of the answers for any of you that are interested. Okay, so thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you in September, and thank you to John for delivering the seminar to us.
Pleasure, and look forward to welcoming you here in Oxford.